What is up, you guys? Welcome to Illumination Lab. My name is Justin, and welcome to a new series we're calling Digital Junkyard. In this series, we'll take 3 pre-made assets from Kitbash with completely different styles, and we'll break those assets down and make something completely new out of them. In this project, our goal is to make a temple, and we'll do that by using these 3 assets. I'm excited for this one. This is going to be a fun one today, so without further delay, let's get into it. Alright, so jumping into Cinema4d here, I'm just going to connect to Kitbash real quick and we will pull this up. So for our kits, we do have a few different ones we're going to use here. We are going to use this hacker's den here. And then for our actual temple, we're going to use this one, Rotunda of Dionysus here. And we're just going to import that. And on top of that, I'll just bring in a cyberpunk building as well. And then we'll just hop into Cinema4d. And so you see our 3 assets here. So my idea for this is some group or some company stumbled upon this temple and they've kind of used it as like an underground hideout or some sort of area where they are doing some sort of nefarious business here. So that is pretty much the story behind this one. And then we're going to hop into Meshy, and we do have this nice statue. I thought this would be kind of a cool centerpiece within our temple here, and so we're just going to bring that over to our scene real quick. Alright, so jumping into Cinema4d, we're just going to bring in that figure here. I'm just going to copy this and bring this over into our scene. And then I'm just going to rename this real quick, and then we are going to resize this to the middle of this temple here. So I'm just going to kind of get in place, and I'm just going to turn off the rest of these for now, and we'll jump back to those here later. So I'm thinking somewhere in the middle here, so I'm just going to bring our statue over and just set it right here in the middle. Of course, we will take care of all of this stuff, so I'm just going to delete this just to kind of get rid of this here. But yeah, I just thought this could have some sort of central figure or some sort of centerpiece to kind of have some sort of focal point within our perspective here. So I'm just going to make this a little bit larger and then really just try to establish some sort of initial viewpoint here. And I think maybe something around here would be nice, just because I want to both get the temple and then also be able to get all of the other assets that we bring in here too. So alright, so I'm just going to bring in our Redshift camera now that we established a nice shot, and then I'm just going to set up our camera there for now. And both for our temple and our statue, I'm just going to grab a Redshift tag here and just turn that on here real quick. Okay, so to get started with here, we're going to kind of have a different approach here. I'm just going to turn on our Redshift render view here, and we're going to establish the atmosphere first, just because when I bring in a lot of these assets, I do know my machine or even just Redshift in general is going to slow down quite a bit. So I want to make sure that we kind of establish our ambiance first, and then we kind of take it from there. I'm just going to kind of zoom in to a focal length of 80 here, and then just kind of readjust the camera. I'm just going to go into my settings, and then we're going to push that up to 2K just to get a nice composition here. And we could actually push this back to 65, and then we do kind of get a wider lens there. I'm just thinking here. I think I like 65 for now. The statue does need to be a little bit bigger, so we'll just push that up here. And then I'll just hop back into my default camera here. And then I'm just going to make sure that this statue is actually on the ground here, so it's not floating mid-air. All right, so we are going to bring in a dome light, and I'm just going to turn that off here. And then I'm just going to bring in a Redshift environment as well. And then I'm going to bring in a second dome light. And so with this original dome light, just in case we need to pivot from this idea, I can always just kind of delete that and have it on the ready. So with this Redshift environment, I'm just going to drop this down quite a bit here, just so we can kind of see the scene a little bit. And what I'm thinking is some sort of darker, sort of cavernous area. Again, this is kind of a newly discovered temple, and so I want to do something that is a little bit darker. So I think maybe something like a dark blue would be nice, and then we can have a lot of different lights here, like this spotlight or an area lights that we can bring in, and then we can kind of create some really cool rays or different lighting effects here. So I have this area light, and so there's a few different directions we can definitely go in. I can do something where I bring this off to the side here and just kind of rotate this, and then this light kind of comes in from one side here. Kind of push this to make this a little bit darker. And then of course we can go into our Redshift environment and we can bring that down, and you can kind of see what that does within the render view here. And then we can also kind of push that up here. So I think what I'm going to do is just do something like this here, where it is a little bit darker, where it's kind of harder to see, and then you do have that light kind of peeking into the scene here. Let me just bring this down just a tad here. So I kind of like that, just because you can kind of see general outlines of what we're looking at, and it kind of helps create kind of a mood here. I can always kind of push this light up and then just kind of shrink this down, and then I could crank up the exposure to 2 here, and then we can just bring this down. So we could create some sort of almost like a god ray light here. I think that would be pretty interesting. Let me bring this up and bring this back, and maybe something like that. I can even maybe rotate this just to kind of get the lighting right. So maybe something like that, or we can kind of go a little bit more indirect here. Let's also hop into our other settings here and just maybe turn on this LUT here just to see what kind of look we can have. And there's a lot of really cool ones here. We can even turn on bloom, and that kind of gives us more of a like halo effect here. So there's a lot of different creative directions we can go into, but I definitely think we'll try to find something here that will work nicely here. And I don't know, for right now, I think what we'll do is just turn off our LUTs here, just because I kind of like how it is already. And then if we do need to change it, we'll go back in, but none of these LUTs are really quite striking out to me quite yet here. So now what I could do is I could just go in and delete that blue altogether. And that has kind of an overall different sort of feeling there. So let's just kind of stick with that and see what else we can work with. Let's bring in another area light here. And let's see if we could do something maybe on the top here. So I'm just going to rotate this about 90 degrees here. And then we can maybe do like maybe a disc here and just kind of expand that out. Kind of give us a nice overhead light here. And then I'll turn on the environment and then just kind of push this up here. And that kind of makes the light a little bit more sparse. It kind of gives us kind of a unique ambience there. Let me just actually bring in a dome light and see what that could do here. Just to bring in some sort of color in here so it's not completely black. Maybe like a dark blue like that. And then we can just section off this piece just to see what this is going to look like when the render view kind of settles down. And you know, this is kind of clean how it is sometimes with the Redshift environment. It can be quite grainy, but this is kind of a nice overall look. Again, it kind of looks like a temple that was just found, and so it kind of has that same sort of dark, mysterious feel to it. So I think I kind of like that how it is. So I'm just going to delete our dome light here just because we don't need that. And then I'm just going to grab a null, rename it lights, and then just grab all of our lights and put it in there. And then I'm just going to give us a quick save here. And we will get started with this. And then I'm just going to go back into our settings and I'm just going to readjust this just so it looks a little bit better when we're working within our viewport here. So all right, so first up, I'm just going to turn on our building once again here. And I kind of like these signs here. The sign is actually really cool. I think what we can do is maybe kind of take the sign or these panels here and just kind of shrink this down, and we'll kind of place this around the temple here. And so what's kind of unique here is it is basically multiple screens here, and then it does have a plant texture on there. So I think that kind of goes with the same sort of like jungle, newly found temple sort of thing. And what's cool about this is it brings in some sort of vegetation, but of course with it being on the screen and having more of a cyberpunk look, it kind of gives us very much a different feel here. But I like kind of bringing in some sort of vegetation, and just having it as a digital format is kind of an interesting perspective here, or just kind of an interesting idea in general. So I'm just going to adjust the size here and just kind of put this in place. So I'm thinking of something like this, where it's kind of between these columns here. Now maybe something like that could be cool. Let me just kind of zoom in here. And it's kind of off on the angle, so we'll definitely have to fix that. So let's rotate that here. Maybe till about there. And the nice thing is once we get this one down, we can kind of copy and paste the same format here. So with this, what I'm really looking at is I'm making sure that those cables at the bottom aren't going through the floor. And then I'm just going to turn off this statue here just so I can see this a little bit better. But I think that is good. I'm just going to copy and paste. We'll kind of move this over and kind of start that process here. Of course, if we don't really care for it too much, we can always adjust it here, but I think this is going to be a pretty good look here, so we'll just go ahead and do that here. And then I'm just rotating the camera here just to make sure that that is somewhat lined up appropriately. And then I'm just going to copy and paste and bring that one over. And again, just rotate this. And then we'll hop into perspective, and that is kind of the idea. So let's just go back here and continue this pattern here. And then while I'm doing this, what I will say is, again, I'm thinking about kind of the overall look here. I want this to look like it's still kind of hidden and underground, but some sort of group or entity or corporation kind of have taken over this area and they're using it for some sort of purpose here. So I'm thinking of doing a lot of different machines of some sort, maybe some sort of like beds or sofa, or just kind of like a messy sort of area, as if someone's been living there or residing there secretly, and then they're kind of working around the temple. And so I think that is going to be kind of interesting here and kind of adds kind of a lot to the scene in general. And then what I'm going to do to make this easy is I'm just going to copy and paste our panels here, and then we're just going to rotate that and just set it in position here. So that makes it quite easy. I'm just going to bring in a null here and just name this real quick, and then put all of those panels in that null here. So I'm gonna try and be as clean in our workspace as possible. So let's see how long that will actually last for. But next up, I'm going to turn the building back on here, and I think there is maybe a couple more things we can grab from this. I think maybe something like this would be kind of cool. It kind of reminds me of something that is in Vegas, where you have some sort of combination between like modern lights and then more of kind of like a stylized architecture, kind of like a Caesar's Palace, where it has more of a Roman-esque look to it. So I think maybe doing that would be kind of interesting here. I'm just going to bring this over, and let's maybe turn this here, and we can maybe do this somewhere in the back here. And so I think that will be cool because it will kind of give us a good sense of depth within our render here. And so there's kind of just multiple things kind of going on here. So this top part is kind of in the way, so I'm just going to turn that off for now, but I'm definitely going to kind of leave that within the scene here. And then we can maybe set this maybe right here in the middle, and this is kind of like off to the side here, so it kind of makes our left side of our scene a little bit heavier. But I think I kind of like that, how that is. And then what we can do is we can just go back over to this building here, and I think we could do something kind of cool with this. So I'm just going to grab this and move this over here, and maybe we can put this somewhere in the back area as well. I'm just going to kind of shrink this down and rotate this. And usually during these stages, what I do is I just try to find something that is either intriguing or something that I like, and try to apply it somewhere to the scene. Of course, if it doesn't really work out or it doesn't go with the direction we're looking for, we can always just go back and delete that. But sometimes I will bring in just kind of extra stuff just to kind of see kind of what works and what's looking nice here. So we're just going to probably grab a lot more assets here than we're probably going to use, but that's kind of the fun in all of this, is you're essentially doing this world building. And so with that, I mean, usually the process and kind of like playing around with it kind of gives you a good idea of the overall direction you want to go in. And so some of these assets here are not going to last, but again, that's a part of the process and a part of the fun of all of this. And so next up here, what I'm going to do is maybe bring in a few more signs here. And I'm just going to kind of bring this down and kind of adjust our camera here. And then I'm just going to shrink this down. And then maybe I can kind of put this on the other side to kind of balance out the scene a little bit. So let me just adjust this. And again, bring this down. Maybe about there, and then we can kind of line this up to the column here. Yeah, maybe about there. And then I'll just adjust it here. And so what's interesting about this, if you could see, is it's kind of at an angle here. So I'm just going to adjust it here slightly and just kind of apply it here. And then let me hop into our perspective. And yeah, you can kind of see it's at an angle here. So let me just see what that's like. Interesting. Okay. So we'll just go back and fix that, and then I'll jump out of our perspective here, and then we'll just go back over to our building and just kind of take a peek here, see if there's anything else that's kind of worth it for us. Let's see what's on the top here. So it seems like a whole bunch of ventilation up here. Let's maybe grab this and kind of move this over. Depending on what this is going to look like, this could be kind of a cool little piece here. So I'm just going to zoom in, and we're just going to rotate this and shrink this down. So we can maybe kind of take this over here and maybe kind of put this off to the side of some sort. I don't know. Let's actually delete this one here, and we can maybe kind of bring this to the back. Maybe something like right next to the sign here. Probably have to play with that a little bit. Let's go back and see if we can find anything else. I think we're done with that, so I'm just going to delete that. Now we're just going to go into our hacker's den here. So I'm just going to just turn off this roof here, just so we can kind of peek inside. And there's tons of little goodies in here we can kind of play with. So let's just kind of take a peek here and kind of zoom in. We could definitely do something with this chair here. That's kind of a cool look. So let's grab this and bring this over. And then I'm just going to kind of hop back into the scene. And then we're just going to adjust the size of this chair. And then we can maybe kind of put it off to the side here. So again, we're going to try to create some sort of lived-in room or some sort of altered room here. And so I think kind of maybe putting this over here near the back would be kind of cool. especially because with building this stuff, I want to kind of keep in mind our perspective as well. And so I want it to kind of make sense within our initial render. And so I think maybe something like that, where it's kind of turned towards the camera a little bit, is going to be quite nice. Next up, we do have a lot of cables here, so I think maybe having a ton of cables kind of running throughout the temple would be kind of cool. Just kind of like a makeshift area for these guys of some sort. So there's a whole bunch of like messy cables all over the place. It kind of gives a sense of either laziness or like or some sort of like fast operation where it's not really a long-term residence. It's just kind of setting up, doing what needs done, and then leaving of some sort. So with a lot of these assets here, just kind of setting this up, you can also kind of tell a story as well too. So of course, I try to always aim for some sort of aesthetically pleasing either render or shots in general, but I think if you could kind of convey or tell a story at the same time, that kind of adds a little bit more value to what you are kind of making in general. So let's take this cable here and maybe just kind of rotate this and kind of put this to the back here, and then we'll just make sure that that is kind of laying on the ground. Now we do need something else for the end of these cables here, so we'll probably find some sort of box. These would be perfect here. So let me just move these over, and then we can kind of set this up kind of right next to the statue here, and then we can do something where it kind of hides the cables. Maybe it looks like it kind of goes in the side here, and then we'll kind of push this up again just to kind of hide those cables. And then I'll just make sure that this is actually sitting on the floor versus actually, you know, going through the floor, which is not ideal. So yeah, looks pretty cool so far. Let's go back in here, zoom back in. And so let's see what else we have. So we have this kind of a cool area over here with all these computers, and then we have this over here which looks like kind of a server setup here. So I think that would actually be kind of cool, especially since that kind of goes with our overall theme here. So let's actually grab this asset and kind of move this over, and then just kind of hop back into our temple here, and then we'll bring our servers up. And then maybe let's do this off to the back side here. And then I'm just going to rotate this, and then maybe just kind of have it almost like it's setting against the pillars here. Let's see, let's kind of move this sign here just to kind of adjust that. And then of course I want to make sure that this is actually sitting on the ground. Alright, so we'll just go back in here, and this is actually pretty cool here, these mattresses. So let's actually bring this over. Again, that kind of adds to the non-permanence of this area. Like, this adds almost a sense of these people just being in the space, almost like a liminal space of some sort, where it's just a temporary position here. So I think these mattresses that are kind of really not together and kind of bending and kind of leaning on each other and leaning on equipment, you know, not not an ideal situation. I think that kind of adds to just the storytelling in general. So we'll just kind of put that in the back there. We can always adjust it, but I think something in the back could be quite nice. Let's look over here. So you do have this pretty massive machine here. I just don't think with what we have going, that machine would really fit well within our composition here. So I think the machine's cool, but I don't know. We can maybe grab this and maybe bring this over. And let's just... No, delete that. Alright, so next we are going to grab these cables here, and we can do quite a bit with these cables here. Let's just bring this over. And then we'll just kind of zoom back in, and we can rotate this maybe 90 degrees here. And this can be cool because it could almost feel like these are hanging, but this does need to go the other way. That makes a lot more sense there. So let's just rotate those and then maybe just put those up here. And so again, that does kind of add a little bit more to the storytelling, where it is just kind of very chaotic and just all of this equipment is kind of set up in just such a messy way here. So let's just kind of sit those there for now and just go back into this den here. So maybe we can grab some of this, definitely not all of it, but maybe some sort of monitor here, or just like a computer in general. Also too, they do have this board here. Let's actually bring this board over and kind of bring this in here. And I kind of like this here, maybe just kind of set up on the side. Again, not really hanging or anything, just kind of leaning against, you know, one of these pillars here. I like this because it has a lot of different pictures and notes on it. So again, it kind of adds to more of that storytelling of maybe these people or this organization's looking for something, or there's obviously like some sort of note taking involved here. So we are just going to kind of line this up and just make sure that this is both on the ground and kind of leaning against this pillar without clipping too much. And let's see here. Let me move this over, kind of bring this back. And I'm just going to kind of a look at this just to see what this is like. I'm just going to adjust this. Cool. So let's go back to the den here, and let's just kind of zoom in. So there is this couch. We can definitely bring this couch over, and maybe we can put this off on the right side here. Let me just rotate this. And then again, maybe off on this side, kind of at an angle. All right, so I'm just going to bring these cables in, and I think maybe have this on the floor as well. So I'm just going to rotate these and maybe just put this over here. And maybe having it wrapping around the couch can be kind of a cool look here. And maybe these boxes here are kind of sitting on top of these cables. And then I do like this as well. This kind of brings a cool look. I think this would actually be nice to have in the back here. And so like something like this. Let me actually bring this up, and then I kind of have a pattern kind of going from the bottom all the way up, as if, again, they're trying to conceal themselves or trying to hide somehow, or maybe even block in some lights. I think we can also do some cool effects too with adding in some lights behind these, just so the light can kind of come in kind of a more of a dynamic way in general. But yeah, something like that would be good. So I'm just going to move that up to about there, and then just give it a save real quick, and then just increase that size just so it's kind of flush, kind of between those two areas there. And then I'm just taking a look here. Maybe we'll bring this up a little bit. Actually, let me bring this down here. And I'm just trying to figure it out, because if we do that, we are kind of blocking out that sign and a few of our other things. So let me actually bring this back, see what that looks like. And we could do something like that where we do have the boards there, but at the same time we do see a lot of our original signs here. So let's see, let me actually hop into the correct perspective here, just to kind of check out what we can see here. I think these panels on the side are kind of blocking a lot of opportunities for us, so I'm just gonna go ahead and delete those. So I definitely want to keep most of these panels here, but I think a lot of that was just kind of taken away from our overall scene here. So now we can kind of see both the couch and also that chair on the left side as well a little bit more now. So let's hop back into the den here. And then I did find this box here, so let's kind of move this over. And I think what we can do, I kind of had an idea, maybe this box and then also this ladder here. Let's kind of put the ladder maybe off to the side. Yeah, so again, just kind of adding in to the liminality of this, where it's just very kind of messily done. And so I'm just going to kind of have this ladder kind of off on the side here. And maybe, yeah, like maybe off to the back here behind the statue. And I think also maybe putting a ladder there kind of helps the viewer kind of understand the scale of the statue and kind of the temple in general. And so yeah, so something like that. So I'm liking how this looks here. We do have this, you know, this table of some sort kind of floating in the air. I'm thinking with that table we can kind of bring this down and almost like make a desk out of this. And so we can maybe put some computers on there, maybe off kind of near this chair here. So I'm just going to bring this down and maybe put this, you know, right around here. That would be nice. But yeah, just kind of putting this here would be kind of nice. And then it's also kind of not blocking too much of our stuff here. And then I'm just gonna go back in, and these crates are kind of a nice touch here. So let's actually grab these crates here and just kind of move this over. Bring this up and maybe just kind of set this on the ground here. Again, that's kind of more of an accessory or kind of like a storytelling element there. Let's see what else we can grab. Maybe something like this as well. Let me actually bring this over and just kind of get into perspective here, and then just bring this up. And so this kind of adds some sort of carpet or just kind of like a, you know, home or office like atmosphere here. And so with doing this too, it's going to be definitely a balance between bringing in assets that kind of add to the scene and not bringing in too much assets where it's just a whole bunch of clutter here. So with that being said, I think I'm going to wrap up most of this here. What I'm going to do is actually bring in a monitor, just like how I said earlier. So I'm just going to maybe grab this one here, and we're just going to bring that over. And kind of bring this up. And again, maybe just rotate this and put this on this table here. And maybe kind of have it at an angle just so we could kind of see it within our perspective and kind of get an idea of what it is. And then let me just go back over there. And then we can bring this chair. And just kind of rotate this. And again, just kind of have it at an angle. Again, doesn't have to be too neat because that kind of goes with the world building here. Let's grab another one of these carpets here. It could be a carpet, mat, you get it. So let me give this a quick save. Kind of bring this over. And maybe just kind of put this underneath. Yeah, it looks like more of a mat here than actual carpet. So let me just kind of put that underneath here. And then let's just try to find some final touches here. Looks like some food here, so let's maybe grab some food. Again, more for like storytelling purposes. And then they do have this one here that actually has some drinks. And it comes with, looks like this monitor as well. So that would actually be quite cool. Let's just bring this up here and kind of zoom in. So I'm just going to bring that back. And we're just going to rotate this here. Maybe just kind of put this, you know, off to the side here. You know, really no organization at all. Maybe actually let's turn this here. And then let's take this and just kind of move it more forward. Yeah, that's pretty cool there. And then we'll just go back here. Let's maybe bring in another crate here. And I don't know, maybe put this kind of near the foreground a little bit. Let's actually hop into our perspective just so we can kind of see. And then we can kind of cheat a little bit because of the plants there. Or maybe we can put this over here with the rest of the boxes. And you remember when I said I was going to keep this area clean? That didn't last too well here. So with a lot of these here, I do have to kind of pull these out of their original nulls here. So I'm just going to go in and make sure that those are all pulled before we delete this here. So I'm just going to do that real quick and we'll hop back right into the scene right after here. All right, so now that I have my object manager a little bit more clean here, we're just going to bring up our Redshift render view and we're just going to put that into perspective here. And it's just going to take a quick second. I'm going to put this in 2K. And this is what this looks like. Let's actually go back in and turn on our lights. And that looks a little bit better here. Of course, we kind of made some creative differences since we have done these lights in the beginning, so we may want to kind of tweak these a little bit. let me just grab the camera and let's zoom in to about 80 for our focal length. And I'm just going to adjust it here slightly just so it's a little bit more balanced. Now I'm just going to grab those wood planks there and I'm just going to copy and paste. And I think I'm just going to make a few of these here and just kind of bring these all the way down. Actually, let me just start this one up here and just kind of adjust these. And let me just go back here just to kind of see what this is looking like. And I'm just going to bring in a area light as well. And I'm just going to bring this over. And just bring this up. And like I said earlier, I'm going to see if we can maybe push in some light from the back here. And I'm just going to increase the size of that light. Do that, make it a little bit bigger. Let's see. Let's maybe reduce this here. And I can bring this up and kind of rotate this just so it's kind of pointing down a little bit. And let's block this off so we can kind of see this a little bit better. And then let me turn this one off. So the problem here is I feel like the scene is quite flat since we put in a lot of these assets here. And so I want to make sure that the lighting is appropriate where it kind of not only illuminates the scene, but also kind of adds in a little bit more depth and intrigue into our scene here. So, or what I could do is I can take this light and just turn it into a blue here. And kind of maybe reduce the spread here. And then that kind of gives us kind of like a blue hue almost. Almost as if this temple was in some sort of cave or some underground area. So I think that blue kind of is kind of interesting, especially with all of the blue within the scene. And I'm just kind of sectioning out this area just to kind of see what this looks like. So let's bring in another area light here. And I'll just kind of bring this up and maybe near the front here to kind of illuminate the staircase and then kind of the foreground of our scene here. We can maybe rotate this and then just bring down the spread here. And maybe bring this up. Kind of like the idea of doing something with the statue to make the statue a little bit more dynamic here. I'm just going to rotate this here and then just kind of bring this back to the statue and maybe up a little bit so it almost looks like a skylight of some sort kind of coming down and illuminating that area. So I'm just kind of seeing what this is looking like. Let's actually go into this light here And then we can kind of add a little bit more hint of yellow, as if maybe this is, you know, sunlight that's kind of breaking into the cave. And I'm just trying to kind of see what this looks like real quick. I think with most of this process too, if you don't get the right atmosphere or just kind of overall lighting in general, I think your scene pretty much falls flat in general, even if you have kind of an interesting look here. So I think it's especially important to really put a lot of emphasis on just kind of how the overall scene looks in general here. And then what we can do to kind of customize this a little bit more, we can go into our panels here, and let me just section this off so we can kind of see it better. We can maybe play around with this emission. And with 100, that kind of gives us a kind of a better glow here. Let's see. That may be a little too bright, but I kind of like that idea here. Let me bring it down to 50, maybe like a 35. And then let me go back in here, and then we can crank this up to 50. And then same with this sign here, we can kind of go in and just crank up the emission to a 50, just kind of bring in a little bit more glow here. Yeah, I think I'm gonna drop this down to 20 again. And then this lighting is still kind of bugging me, so let's go back in and just kind of change this here. And I kind of like it like that, where you kind of have more of a shadow around, looks like the right leg here. And then it's kind of illuminating the body a little bit. And then you get some indirect light on the face. And yeah, I think that looks pretty clean. I like how the light is kind of both illuminating the body and then also the servers in the back as well, but you still have a lot of shadows here, especially with the leg here, the right leg, so that kind of adds a little bit more depth. And then you do have less light around the face here, but I think that is a little bit more dynamic than what we originally had it. But other than that, that is pretty much it for this one. Let me know what you guys think. I had a lot of fun with this one. Kind of a different sort of version than our last Junkyard episode here, but I like this one. I want to get a little bit more into the storytelling aspect here. So in this third one, we're gonna make this a little bit better here. I was really just kind of playing around with this one and just kind of seeing what we can do. And then these are the overall renders that I got. So I have this one here, which is our original render. And then we do have this one, which is a little bit more close up here and kind of gives us a different perspective of our statue. And so, but yeah, that was pretty much it. Let me know what you guys think. I have a lot of fun doing this series so far, but I'm definitely excited for this next one. It should be a good one for us. You guys have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next one.